Good morning, everybody. Welcome to everybody this morning. You can't see me. I'm short as it is, and even shorter when there's tall people standing in front of me, and you guys look beautiful this morning. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you being here. We'll call our meeting to order. It's like 9:01 or whatever. We'd like to welcome this morning Los Tigres de Tolleson, accompanied by music coordinator Mr. Casillas, who will perform for us. I want to announce this first. They are an award-winning group who have performed and won at the Tucson International Mariachi Conference, and their lead singer, Hannah Gomez, just returned from a singing competition in Guadalajara, Mexico. And we congratulate you guys. Glad to have you here this morning. We are going to start with our, what are we starting with? Our pledge or our national anthem? What are we starting with? Pledge, right? What are we starting with? The pledge. Okay, that's what I thought. Dr. Kaur will be starting us with our pledge.
Please join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we'll go into our performance. Thank you. One, two. Thank you so much. Absolutely beautiful. Great job.
Thank you.
Job. Fantastic job.
Excellent. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
One more round of applause.
Have a good day. With that, we're adjourning the meeting. I mean, isn't that what it's all about anyways? It's all about our kids and fantastic performances, fantastic people. That voice was awesome. So were the instruments. And so was the conductor. He was singing with them. That was fantastic. We don't have a prayer this morning, so we'd just like to start off with a moment of silence. If everybody would do that for a brief moment, we'd appreciate that. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And then with that, we will move into our roll call. Thank you.
President Narducci.
Here.
Vice President Kaur.
Here.
Superintendent Douglas.
Present.
Member Baker.
Present.
Member Broussard.
Present.
Member Burton.
Present.
Member Chang.
Present.
Member Kay.
Present.
Member Mack.
Present.
Member Taylor.
Present.
Member Wellborn.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We'll move right into our reports. I do not have a report this month, so we do.
President Narducci, before we get into the reports, I just want to make aware of everybody who's in the room. If you do go over to the adjacent cafeteria nook, we do live stream on YouTube, so you can access the live stream off your phone or cellular mobile device.
Okay.
If for some reason you can't be in the room.
The only thing that I'm concerned about is, if they want to stand, that's great, is fire code. So I don't know where we are with respect to fire code. That's one thing I don't want to do is get fined. So as long as we're told by ADE that we are not in violation of fire code with the numbers in here, you're welcome to sit or stand wherever you can. And it'll get a little hot in here. And we promise not to do anything in here that's not on live stream. All right, so with that, we will move into, and we welcome all of you and glad you're here. We'll move into the superintendent's report.
Thank you. I'm going to step off and go to the podium for just a moment, Mr. President.
Okay.
Mr. President, members of the board, it is always a pleasure when I can bring some excellence in education to you, and today we are bringing some teachers to be recognized. 2 Arizona teachers have been named as national recipients of the prestigious Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. PAEMST was established in, and don't ask me, they didn't give me a note on exactly what that acronym stands for, but I'm assuming it's something, M is mathematics and S is teaching, or S is science and teaching for T. Was established in 1983. It is the highest recognition of K-12 mathematics and science that a teacher may receive for outstanding teaching in the United States. And we're going to bring the 2 national awardees, and then we are going to bring 3 Arizona. As a matter of fact, I think I'll do it in reverse order. I'll bring the 3 Arizona state finalists up. For excellence in elementary math teaching, we have Amy Legara. Is she here today? Yes. Come on. As they say, come on back. Thank you so much. We have a lovely plaque for you and a certificate of recognition from the Presidential Award. I'd like to give you, on behalf of the department, we have challenge coins. For anyone who's not, For anyone who's not familiar with challenge coins, they are a tradition from our military and are awarded in units for excellent service in what you do. So for your service to education, thank you. And they're always presented with a handshake. Thank you, and God bless you for what you do. Would you like to Thank you, and congratulations, and God bless you for what you do every day. Our next will be for excellence in elementary science teaching, and I hope I say this right, Sevilla Anderson. As being a finalist, and I have a challenge coin for you. Thank you. Thank you for what you do. Thank you. Oh, that's right. You do it again. Here, I'll hold one. Here, you hold that right now. I'll take your face. Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. And next, I should have announced the schools, but next, excellence in elementary science teaching is Mandy Healy. And a challenge form for all done. Thank you so much. I'll hold one for you if you'd like to. There we go.
Superintendent Douglas, just so you know, Mandy was a little girl in my neighborhood for many, many years, and her mom, who's with her today, is one of our family best friends.
Stand up and be recognized. So now our 2016 Arizona State National Awardees For excellence in elementary math teaching is Penny Robeson. And so she gets this lovely crystal, I'm not sure what we call these, they're award. And see, because now she doesn't get a certificate also, because she got to go to Washington, D.C., right?
I did, yes.
Okay, so that was really exciting. But here,
Yes.
there you go, and here's a challenge coin.
Thank you.
On behalf of the department, thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much.
And the last is Excellent in Elementary Science Teaching awardee is Eric Von Berg. And you also got a trip to Washington, right? Yes, you did. There you go. So there's that, and here's the challenge coin. Thank you so much. And those of you awardees, if you do have family with you, please stand up, take one more bow yourselves, and have any family who's with you, please stand and be recognized. Once again, can we give them one more round of applause for the great work they do each and every day? Thank you so much. And, Mr. President, with that done, one more thing I would like to report to the board. It's not exactly the newest of new news. I'm sure you probably read, but I just wanted to give an update that ADE, we've reached final agreements. Finally, with the United States Department of Education to correct audit findings in the federal Title I Special Ed IDEA. What we've done is, when this came to my attention, and these are actually problems that predated me, I'm always very thankful that the federal government never goes back further than the audit where the issue was found, because these issues have gone on, unfortunately, for some time. But we worked with a third-party independent auditing group to make sure not just these two areas of the department's grants were audited, but we've made sure to audit all of our areas to make sure that everything is done appropriately, exactly as we would expect it to be for our children. It probably, I don't know, I guess it was almost the better part of a year before we were able to get the federal Department of Ed to sign off on all the work we've done. And just as a somewhat interesting side note, I mean, I'm a finance person in a past life, so numbers fascinate me. I mean, people think, oh my gosh, it was the Title I, what's the big deal, why didn't you fix it? Well, this is like 20 spreadsheets of calculations. It's not just you put in a little formula and you calculate it against the number of students you have. It's literally one thing depends on another, depends on another, depends on another. So while we were trying to resolve past issues, we still had to move forward, which made complications. But the bottom line to me, what I'm absolutely, I'm very pleased we've been able to do is reach an agreement with the federal government that underfunded schools will be made whole, and the vast majority of them, probably 90% of them, if I remember correctly, will be made whole virtually immediately. Some with larger amounts, it will take a little bit more time. But the good thing is no overfunded schools will be expected to return funding. So we know through all the investigation and the audits we've done, while some schools got more money than they should have gotten and some schools got less money than they should have gotten, that money all went and was spent on the appropriate student groups. So if they were Title I, it still went to low poverty schools. If it was special ed, the money was in special ed. So very glad to have that behind us and have that finished up. So with that, Mr. President, that's my report.
Thank you, Superintendent Douglas. We'll move on to the Executive Director's report. Director Williams.
President Arducci, Superintendent Douglas, members of the board, my update is brief, and I'm tag teaming with Member Mack. So just wanted to bring to the attention to the board members that board staff is registering board members for 2 conferences. One is the NASDAQ conference, and that will occur October 17th through the 19th in Portland, Maine. It is a professional practices institute, and it's an opportunity to learn from other states what they have implemented in regard to teacher discipline. The second annual conference is from NASB, and that is October 17th through the 20th, and that's in Denver, Colorado. Board staff does need to know by the end of today whether or not you would like to attend that conference in Denver. And one of the topics is equity, and Member Mack is part of that LEAP group through NASB, and she wanted to share with you what that group has been working on, and I do believe she's presenting at the annual conference, part of the group. But your handouts are in front of you, and then I will turn it over to Member Mack.
Thank you. So you have 2 handouts in front of you. One is the NASB Leading for Equity and Excellence project, or also known as LEAP, Equity Lens. So this lens is really about 5 practices of state boards and how we can lead for equity transformation. The whole idea behind LEAP, or Leading for Excellence and Equity, is that to build the capacity of state board members in order to lead systemic equity transformation, to equip us with the skills to promote equity and equality through policy development and implementation. So throughout this process, I've really appreciated the opportunity for open and honest and transparent dialogue with other members, state board members throughout the states who are in this cohort. 2018 is the pilot year for the national cohort as a way to advance equity, and throughout the process, we've applied historical thinking. We've developed a critical consciousness and explored principles of moral leadership, all while doing interactive learning tasks and analyzing historical decisions as well as policy decisions as well as data. How are we looking at all of this? And all of this has really led to some thought-provoking conversation. And, you know, we all talk about the achievement gap, and we're struggling to close that. And so this process has been really about raising awareness and looking at this through these equity lens. So you have the 2 documents in front of you and really asking those questions of are we knowledgeable about who is historically underserved and marginalized in our state? Are we reviewing achievement data group for all student groups, statewide and by district? What kind of effect or impact will policy decisions have on all different subgroups and groups as we're thinking about ways to move policy forward? And then always reaching out to diverse stakeholder groups, and then always revisiting our strategic plan to ensure that we are reviewing and updating our strategic plan in order to advance equity. And so I really like that word advance, and it's taking a proactive role to do so. And then the lens from the Washington State Board of Education, this is a really nice short version of it, but the bottom line is really whatever action or decision we're making, how is this going to achieve educational equity? And so they provide some questions, you know, identifying unintended consequences, what are some restorative measures that we could do, how are these impacting students? So just for your review, and just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ability to do a minute and a half? Okay.
Mr. President, may I ask a question? Is this is the call to the public for non-agendized and consent agenda, not for the things on the general session?
President Arducci, Superintendent Douglas, for this non-agendized and consent, we have 5, and then we have, I would say, about 43, I think, 43 for the general session.
Okay. So for the first go-round?
I would recommend that you keep the time all the same.
That's what we'll do. I love your recommendation. We'll adopt that. So we'll keep it to a minute and a half for everybody. And if we could just try to consolidate your thoughts and keep on track, and we'll do the timer. Thank you. Proceed.
First up, we have Anna Thornton, followed by Amy Sislak.
Thank you, President, Vice President, Superintendent, board members. I have a minute and a half, so I have to get through this quick. I joined a group called Purple for Parents to help moderate the group. I've seen Red for Ed teachers, participants, attack people personally, push them out into traffic, destroy their businesses. I received a voicemail to my personal cell phone threatening to release my personal information to the entire public. It's a federal crime. It's called doxing. A police report has been filed. The FBI report has been filed. There are 13 teachers that I made a public post about. All I said was Red for Ed supporters, with the pictures that are public on Facebook. No attacks to them or anything. That one post generated the voicemail. Then I was sent another screenshots, actually several screenshots. These are Arizona teachers I've identified except for 2, talking to me about me in a personal group, reporting me to Facebook. They thought I worked for a company, wanted to report there. These people lashed out. My concern is, if these are teachers, and I personally can't find out who that anonymous teacher was, we need to get them out of the classroom. If they'll do that to me, some of these are over special ed kids. Not acceptable. Thank you.
Next up, we have Amy Sislak, followed by Rames Lugo.
Good morning, President, Vice President, Superintendent Douglas. My name is Amy Sislak, and I'm the proud principal of your #1 ranked public high school in Arizona, University High School in the Tucson Unified School District. We're very lucky. We get a lot of national recognition about the great things that our teachers are doing for students. But the national ranking really doesn't take into account what we actually do. It just says that we buy a lot of advanced placement tests. What really measures what a great job we're doing for students is our A letter ranking. We're very proud to be an A school, and we're very proud about the steps that our teachers have taken to maintain that A ranking. They're very, very passionate about looking at every single thing they can do to maintain an A, to be a better A. And not only that, to share what we have done as an A school with every other school who might not be. Because to hold prisoner to knowledge and experiences from schools who might need that is just a crime. And we want to make sure that every student has that accountability as well as the support from other schools to do so. A better conversation is, how can we look at accountability as like a personal trainer? And for us, that letter grade is a personal trainer. It pushes us harder. It finds new ways for us to be better as a school. And we're so thankful that we have this strong accountability system because it really, really shows all the hard work that our teachers are putting in at University High School. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have I'm sorry, I'm not saying this correctly. Ramses Lugo. Is that right? And following by Dr. Patty Horn.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ramses Lugo, and I'm a teacher at Western School of Science and Technology. I was born and raised in West Phoenix and have had the privilege of teaching there over the last 4 years in the neighborhood of Maryville. Every Friday morning, we have our morning meeting, which is a weekly event in which all of our students and staff members gather. We start every morning meeting with our mission moment, which our mission moment is to become the first A-rated high school in Maryville. This A rating is what we aim for. It is the standard and expectation we have set for ourselves and our students every single day. Obtaining an A rating will carry several meanings for our parents, our staff members, and our students. For our parents, an A rating will stand as proof that they made a great decision for their children's future and trusting our schools to educate their children, a responsibility which every staff member on our campus has a passion towards meeting. For our staff members, it proves that we are ensuring a high quality education for all of our students that fosters academic growth and achievement. For the most important individuals in our schools, our students, it is a testament that it does not matter what type of community you live in, high income or low income. You deserve to have a high quality education that gives you the tools needed for college career and success. It will give us a sense of pride in our community and knowing that in working together, we can, as a Western family, accomplish any goals we set for ourselves. Every day, I get to work with these amazing students, and I'm witness to their drive, their hard work, and their determination. Many of these students share the same story as mine. They are first-generation Americans, and they will soon be the first members of their families that will go to college. They are taking advantage of academic opportunities that many of their parents and guardians did not have, and will in turn change the trajectory of their families' lives and their lives through obtaining a high-quality education. Our Maryville students are on the rise. Our schools are on the rise. We will become the first A-rated high school in Maryville, but most importantly, we will not be the last one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Dr. Patty Horn, followed by Yolanda Sotelo.
Good morning, President Narducci, Superintendent Douglas, and other board members. My name is Dr. Patty Horn, and I'm here as president of a newly formed organization that I would like to share with you so that you will know about what we are trying to do in Arizona. We are not just the voice of teacher preparation programs, but we are the voice of education across the state. At least that's our goal. So what we want you to know is that we have a bold statement to make, and yet we feel like we are a bold group, even though we are very small. In July of 2017, the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Preparation officially recognized us as a state affiliate. So standing behind me are a few of my board members, Linnea Linning, Kimberly Toby, and Lindy Gadiano, who is representing Kimberly LaPrade. So we represent a small group, but we represent not only state and public institutions, but private. We also represent community members and faculty. And we want you to know that we're willing to serve as educational leaders in our state. Together, we have officially formed the Arizona Association of Colleges for Teacher Preparation. Never before has such a collective voice come together to work regularly to ensure consistency of messaging, of practice, and of outcomes. I would like to provide you with a copy of our recently established mission and purpose of our organization so you can review at a later time. In the short time we have to speak in front of you, we're coming together to unify our voice across the state. So we want you to use us as a resource, and we hope that we will be able to come to you in the future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Finally, we have Yolanda Sotelo.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Board President, Superintendent Douglas, board members, and staff. My name is Yolanda Sotelo. I taught English in Tucson Unified School District for 31 years before retiring, and currently work part-time as a teacher mentor for the Culturally Responsive Pedagogy and Instruction Department. I'm here today to address an update on the grade-changing complaint I spoke about at the December 4th, 2017 board meeting. On August 8th, 2016, I filed a complaint with the TUSD district against Principal Augustine Romero because he was allowed to violate TUSD policy code IKE, which states in part that it is a duty of every teacher to make the decision to pass or fail a student in high school. Then on August 11, 2016, I filed a complaint with ADE against Principal Romero because he was allowed to violate Arizona Revised Statute 15-701, which states a teacher must demonstrate whether to promote or retain a student in grade in a common school on the basis of the prescribed criteria, as well as 15-342, which states the pupil has the burden of proof to overturn the decision of a teacher to promote, retain, pass, or fail the pupil. On August 23, 2016, I was interviewed by the DeConcini law firm who were hired by TUSD to investigate my complaint. On January 6, 2017, ADE investigator McLean spoke to me at length about my complaint. I sent him an abundance of documentation to back up my claim of grade changing. On August 17, 2017, I was notified that the investigation was completed and was sent to the board. On August 4, 2017, I was notified by the investigative team that after completing a thorough investigation into this matter, the Arizona State Board of Education has declined to file a complaint. I spoke in front of this board to ask that my complaint be re-examined. It wasn't. Now I'm back because I want to submit 2 more pieces of documentation that states that former principal Romero did violate district and state policy. The first is a memorandum by former principal Romero's district supervisor direct supervisor. I provided a copy of the first page of the memo. I am also providing the last 2 pages of the DeConcini investigation that states he violated that policy. Even though Attorney Smith states in the investigation that I am not being investigated, her complaint is she still made assumptions of my character and of my teaching without any real evidence. I am leaving a copy of the entire memo and the investigation. I'm not here to ask that my complaint be reexamined. I'm not here hoping that it will, and that former Principal Romero be held accountable for his actions. He was held accountable by TUSD for violating district policy, and that is why he is former Principal Romero. Even though he violated state policy, he was not held accountable. He wasn't cleared. This board chose not to investigate.
We'll have to wrap it up. If
okay.
You could.
The reason I am here, the reason I made the early morning drive from Tucson today is to ask that this board, the state of Arizona, support teachers, but especially students have demonstrated to the governing board that the pupil that master the academic standards adopted by the State Board of Education pursuant to sections 15-701 and 15-701.01. The 6 students whose grades were changed did not show mastery, and that is why they did not earn a passing grade. And
thank you.
Finish with my last paragraph.
Could you hand in your comments, and we'll take it from a hand in the comments.
My last paragraph says, to quote Superintendent Douglas, we cannot continue to have over 50% of our children reading below grade level and think we're going to move forward. If things do not change academically, we will never move forward. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
President Narducci, members of the board, that concludes the item 2, the first call to the public.
Okay, thanks. We'll move on to item number 3 and appreciate the initial comments from the call to the public. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there, board members, are there any items of the consent agenda that need to be removed?
Mr. President?
Yes, Superintendent.
I would like to pull item D and item K.
Superintendent has asked for item D and item K to be removed from the consent agenda. Any others, members? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve items A through C and E through J with the absence of D and K from the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
President Narducci, I just want to note for the record that item 3I had been removed prior to today's board meeting.
Thank you.
So that is not included in the motion.
Thank you. And motion stands, second stands. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Thank you. We'll move on to the discussion of the removed items. Superintendent?
Yes. I have a question on these. This is about the new middle school teaching certificate that we've created, and I see on there it is recommended the board approve NES assessment for professional knowledge elementary and NES assessment of professional knowledge secondary exams. Now, my understanding, come on down. Steve, you're probably the best one to ask this question of. I know we have not had a middle school certificate in the past, and this is due primarily to the reciprocity. So my question is, for the record, I'm wondering, in other places, what do they use for their middle school teaching certificate? Is there a particular test that this board should look in at some time? Is the elementary, high school kind of a stopgap thing for right now to get these in the process?
Mr. President, members of the board, Superintendent Douglas, our vendor Pearson has a National Educator Series, and it does not include a professional knowledge middle grades assessment. So states that use that typically do use elementary or secondary, which overlap. The elementary professional knowledge test covers through grade 8, and the secondary professional knowledge test dips down into grade 6. And so it's that overlap for that 5 through 9 middle grades. In researching a little bit this morning, there is a praxis exam that does exist which would be a different vendor. I did kind of a dipstick read of a couple states. Some states only require a subject knowledge examination, which we do as well, and not a professional knowledge exam. So at this point, if we were to stay with our vendor Pearson for the exam, we'd be looking at creating a custom examination.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
So that's item D, and do you want to move on to the item?
Oh, do I?
K?
You know what? I could move that. Or do you want to do them both together?
If we can do them both together.
Okay, that's fine by me. Kay, I really don't have any questions on. You can see it's about an Arizona Project Aware. It's a grant that's coming into the state. It's been a grant awarded through the Department of Health and Human Services, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. This is an area when we talk about school safety, and I had the privilege of participating in a conference down in Green Valley this past weekend, specifically speaking about school safety. And one of the issues I think it's fair that we came to agreement upon, among others, was that one of the hardest things to deal with is this issue of mental health issues. It seems whenever there's an incident, it always comes out that, there were rumors, innuendo, sometimes reports. Everybody seemed to know who it was going to be that did this. So I'm just happy that the department has this, that it'll be yet one more tool that we'll be able to bring to help keep our students safe in our schools. So that's all. I just wanted to make people aware of it. Sometimes things get a little buried in the consent agenda, not to the board members, but to the community. So that's who I want to have knowledge of this. So with that, I'd be glad to move these two items.
We have a motion from Superintendent Douglas to approve items D and K after the explanation. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much, Superintendent. Move on to the call to the public. Again, we are going to limit to a minute and a half. I think we have approximately 35 or more comments coming up. More, I understand. So we'll turn it over to you, Director Williams.
President Narducci, members of the board, prior to me calling the people who had submitted public comment to speak in front of all of you today, I do want to add to the record that as of Friday, board staff did compile all the public comments that we had received through our emails. We did send those to the State Board of Education members in an email on Friday. For item 5A, we had 3 comments. For items 5C, 5D, I'm just grouping those together. We had 748. And for item 5G1, we had 1 comment. And then I also, just for the board's knowledge and for the record, the board will be receiving the public comments that we received over the weekend. You will see those on this week. But we have roughly 300 total public comments received over the weekend, which brings the total overall count to over 1,000.
Thank you, Director Williams.
You're welcome.
And we did receive all those. And I think most of us all read them as well. And a lot of them were repeat comments. Looked like some of them were cut and paste, but we appreciate the comments, and the board does listen to the stakeholder comments. So we do appreciate those, and we do appreciate your time coming up to the podium today to share with us as well.
So first we have Michelle Bentavegra. Followed by Kenneth D. Mazzi.
Should I start right now? Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Michelle Bentavania. I have this down to 3 minutes, so I'm going to either talk fast or kind of chop up some stuff. So I've been a 12-year high school teacher. The last 5 years I've been teaching primarily high school seniors, so I've had the opportunity to see what our students are when they are ready to prepare for work or career. And as social studies teachers, we do a lot of content. We teach list of items, check it off the box, we test, retest, to see if they've mastered the subject area. But today, they live in a different society. They don't need to know and memorize and give back to us all the information because they have it at their fingertips. What they need to do is figure out what to do with that information. So the standards, 110 teachers got together for the last 2 years. Teachers from, here I'm going to refer to my notes, different backgrounds, different political beliefs, content experts, elementary, secondary, religious affiliations came together to have hard conversations and work tirelessly to design the best possible standards that serve the needs of all students of Arizona. We were told over and over not to look at what happens in our individual classrooms or districts, but how these standards can serve all of Arizona students. As I'm sure you are aware, these standards focus on 6 inquiry arcs. These 6 elements teach students skills to help them analyze all information they have consistently available to them. The new standards have less focus on what and more focus on how to develop questions, gather evidence to support claims, communicate conclusions, and then finally take informed action. These standards are really good because they get away from a checklist of things to teach and actually focus on teaching students how to learn and use history as social sciences as a vehicle. I had a piece about item 5D, and 5D, which I believe Superintendent Douglas is going to recommend, is a list of items, and no different than what we currently are doing. So Richard Riley, the Secretary of Education under Clinton, stated that we are currently preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet, using technologies that haven't yet been invented in order to solve problems we don't even know are problems yet. We must get away from simply teaching a list of topics and teach students how to think critically. So I ask that when you compare the options before you, that you look at what will prepare all Arizona students to be able to shape tomorrow and choose item 5C for the new history and social studies standards. Thank you.
Kenneth DeMasi, followed by Danelle Hogan.
Good morning, President, Superintendent, members of the board. My name is Ken DeMasi, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Arizona Council for the Social Studies. The Arizona Council for the Social Studies is a nonprofit educational organization that for nearly 5 decades has been dedicated to promoting quality instruction for K-12 students and support for social studies educators. During the past many months, a number of our members have been actively and responsibly involved with the development and review process of the proposed history and social sciences standards. From the vantage point of my more than 40-year career as a secondary classroom high school teacher and university instructor, and having experienced many different standards and curriculum guideline revision processes in that time, I believe that the commitment to improvement and excellence by the participants and the integrity and vision displayed by those who moderated the process is to be commended. These standards clearly recognize and respect the notion of district and school leadership and the local factors which are present, while providing a powerful framework with the anchor standards and the 6 elements of the inquiry arc, which will both contribute greatly to the success of work Arizona classroom teachers do in preparing our students for full, effective, and successful participation in civic life. Thank you.
Danelle Hogan, followed by Sarah Torres.
Good morning, Board President, board members, and Superintendent Douglas. My name is Danelle Hogan, and I, just for background information, have a degree in physics with numerous papers published in refereed scientific journals. I have a master's degree in teaching, and I spent 9 years teaching in the classroom, both here in Arizona and in Idaho. I spent 2 years as an Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellow, working with the U.S. Department of Energy on energy literacy in Washington, D.C. And I've spent the last 5 years building this amazing project for the Pima County School Superintendent's Office. That project provided professional development to over 1,500 educators last year, which impacted over 100,000 students. And we gave away over $110,000 worth of equipment and supplies to teachers because you know how desperate the education system funding is in this state. All that to establish my expertise as a professional educator with a solid background in science, scientific evidence-based research, and in science education, both as a classroom teacher and also as a professional development provider for educators. And I think that we can all agree that we want what is best for our students and our teachers and education in this state, which impacts our economy and our standard of living. Based on that experience of more than 15 years as a professional science educator, I'm here to ask this board to make the best choice for new science standards when it comes to this state for our teachers, for our students, for our schools, for our districts, for our taxpayers, and for our economy. And my assessment of what we have available to us, the next generation science standards is the absolute best choice. The second option being the modified version of the draft science standards that so many educators have put their time and effort to develop. I'm asking you to also adopt these standards. You have my letter. I hope that you've read that. You have my opinion piece. I hope you've read that and all of the reasons behind it. But I'm also asking you to adopt these standards, the next generation science standards, for the morale of our teachers. If we can't pay them more, the least we can do is give them high quality resources that allow us to move science education forward in this state. Thank you.
Sarah Torres, followed by Jason Stanley.
Good morning, Mr. President, Superintendent Douglas, and board members. I am Sarah Torres, the Executive Director of the Arizona Science Teachers Association, also known as ASTA. And on behalf of the 1,200 members in our organization, I'm here to share our collective position on the ADE Working Group Science Standards draft document. During the last 18 months, science educators and content experts of Arizona, many of whom are Arizona ASTA members, have worked with the ADE standards section in writing the standards. With over 8,000 comments during the public feedback period, there was much work that needed to be done in a short amount of time to bring forward a document today that is scientifically accurate, developmentally appropriate, and aligned with scientific research. ASTA, just like you, wants the best science standards for our students and teachers. The standards that are being presented today are well designed and implement the 3 dimensions of science that supports rigorous science instruction. As with any document, there are edits that need to be made. To ensure that all of Arizona's students have access to an accurate and complete science education, ASTA would support the State Board of Education adopting the Working Group Arizona Science Standards with 4 modifications as listed in the letter that was sent to you. Items 1 and 2 in the letter request that 2 standards be revised to the Writing Committee's original version. The wording will tighten up the alignment to the learning progression and ensure that teachers of science are not put in a position of teaching non-scientific ideas. Item 3 requests that 4 deleted high school plus standards be reinstated under the E1 core idea. As you know, the high school plus standards are designed for inclusion in expanded discipline-specific courses. The current deletion of all of these standards diminishes the content and critical understanding that our students should learn in a year-long earth science course. Lastly, we request that you restore the wording of core idea L4. This language is consistent with research in science and science education and will support teachers of science not to be put in a position of teaching non-scientific ideas and concepts. On behalf of ASTA, I respectfully request that the State Board of Education direct the Arizona Department of Education Standards Section to make these changes before the final draft is presented for adoption on October 22nd, 2018. Our students, our teachers, our state deserves and needs strong, scientifically accurate standards. Thank you for your consideration.
Next up is Jason Stanley, followed by Terry Welsh.
Good morning, President, Vice President, members of the board. My name is Jason Stanley. I work for the Washington Elementary School District as a science leader in that capacity. I'm here to address item 5D, which is the proposal of the scope and sequence from the Barney Hillsdale Charter School District. And I'll share with you 2 points, one of which you heard some of my colleagues already mention. The comparisons between the scope and sequence and the Arizona standards are quite vast. If you dive into the scope and sequence, you'll notice the primary amount of content from this document is based out of 2009 textbooks, which only gets into what's called core knowledge, and you don't get the opportunity to transfer those knowledge and skills through the science and engineering practices. When you compare that to the draft Arizona standards, practices are prevalent in each and every standard so kids can apply and transfer their knowledge into different skills, such as asking questions or constructing argumentation with evidence. Secondly, I'd like to direct your attention to the connections of the Hillsdale Barney Charter School District with the university it has an association with. It's known as a private Christian university. And when you explore the mission statement of the charter school system, they make it very clear that their ideals are based off a spirit and ideology of the West, which I feel like neglects the countless diversity of stakeholders we have in this great state of Arizona. Even further, when you explore the connections to the Hillsdale Private Christian University, their own director of education has publicly opposed the notion of Common Core and Arizona's adoption of it, saying it's not worth competing in a global economy for our education. That is an idea of a isolationist thought process rooted in fear, and it's not something we should be preparing our students for. We have to prepare our students to be thinking in a larger scale global mindset. Thank you.
Terry Welsh, followed by Eric Von Berg.
Good morning, board members. My name is Terry Welsh, and I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak in regards to my support of the newly created Arizona History and Social Science Standards. This is my 26th year in public education, half of which was in the classroom and the other half in my current role as a secondary social studies specialist for Mesa Public Schools. In my role as an academic leader, I serve as a support for our teachers in the areas of instruction and curriculum development. In addition, I am a social studies methods instructor for Northern Arizona University, in which I share my expertise with the state's next generation of educators. I have dedicated my career to raising the civic leaders of tomorrow. But most importantly, I come to speak as a proud parent of two students, both the product of Arizona Public Schools, who is concerned about the direction of social studies in Arizona. In my time as an educator, I have seen many trends come and go. However, one thing remains consistent. Arizona educators undeniably want the best for students and work hard at providing it. The newly created Arizona History and Social Science Standards, tongue-tie, provide teachers the support to further the intent of the public schools to make great citizens who will protect, defend, and perpetuate this constitutional republic for future generations. The new standards were developed by working groups of educators, administrators, social studies scholars, parents, and community members. Members were from rural and urban districts, large and small, public and charter schools. Decisions were based off of research. The working groups created a set of standards unique to and in the best interest of Arizona students. The standards allow local control for content and do not force a one-size-fits-all approach in our classrooms, meeting the needs of our diverse learners. The new standards were written to challenge students with higher-level thinking. The students are required not only to learn content, but apply their new knowledge, thus making connections to the real world. I ask you to embrace these new standards and respect the hard work of the forward-thinking working group members that created them. It is the best interest of our students and the future of Arizona. Thank you.
Eric Von Berg, followed by Lupita Hightower.
Sorry. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning. I'm here to speak in support of the new draft Science and Social Studies standards. I am a national award-winning educator, parent, lifelong Arizona resident, and the product of Arizona public education. As educators, I believe we accept a role in the awesome and daunting responsibility of preparing students for college, career, and community. And by doing so, we provide our students the building blocks for becoming informed and productive citizens. If we accept this mission, we must recognize that the demands of the students' future reality are radically different from that of previous generations. The rapid pace of innovation alone all but guarantee that the skills, knowledge, and dispositions students will need to have will be different from those in the past. Critical and creative thinking, problem solving, flexible information processing and evaluation, and innovative thinking will all be fundamental requirements for success in the future job market and effective participation in our democracy. It is for these reasons that I wholeheartedly support the adoption of the draft science and social studies standards. They emphasize and put at a premium the skills our students will need to succeed after graduation, regardless of their future pathway they pursue. We need to focus on developing these metacognitive and cognitive tools and not just focus on imparting a curated body of knowledge. If we don't, we risk sending our charges into a global marketplace they are woefully underprepared for. Like the old adage says, it takes a village. The village of educators, content experts, parents, and other stakeholders have worked tirelessly to put forth a set of standards that are responsive to the needs of our students. Not only do the standards wisely focus on the necessary skills and knowledge, they also provide greater freedom, latitude, and local control to accomplish this. The draft standards are the only standards up for consideration that accomplish these goals, so I think it's time to honor the work of the village and adopt the drafted science and social studies standards and better prepare our students for their future. Thank you.
Superintendent Lupita Hightower, followed by Elise Kaufman.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm the proud superintendent for the Tolleson Elementary School District, and I'm here to speak on item 5A. I'm so glad you were able to enjoy our award-winning mariachi band today. We are very proud of Mr. Casillas, our highly effective educator, and of course, our treasures, our students. This is just one example of the many programs offered in our district that focuses on the growth and the well-being of the whole child. A large majority of our students participate in before, after-school opportunities, including sports. We believe that all children are capable of success, no exceptions. We have not expelled a single student in the last 8 years, and we have only had one long-term suspension. All of our students take technology classes, including coding, physical education, art, leadership classes, counseling, among others. And that is what brings me here today. None of these accomplishments, none of these opportunities, none of the focus on the whole child are reflected on a once-a-year assessment where the target keeps moving. I know you have a very difficult decision ahead of you. I thank you for taking this huge responsibility, and I urge you to make decisions on what is best for Arizona and its schools. The narrative is very negative on what happens in public schools, and it also affects teacher retention. The outcomes are not reflective of what is occurring at each school in Arizona. I extend an invitation to each of you to come into our schools, and you will realize that a better way to evaluate what's really happening in our schools would be to use a multifaceted approach that inspires innovation, creativity, and teaching to the whole child, rather than one test focusing on that one test once a year, including the ACELA, where it had lots of glitches, crashes, and a whole new assessment even before you decide on cut scores. Thank you.
Elise, there we go. My microphone was not working. Elise Kaufman, followed by Katie Hansen.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. My name is Elise Kaufman, and I'm in my 8th year of education. I'm also a 4th-generation teacher, so you can say it runs in my blood. I am deeply, deeply passionate about all education for all students, but specifically my students in my secondary classroom. I teach U.S. history, and I take great pride in teaching my students about the greatness and the challenges that our nation faces and the freedom to overcome those challenges. We work daily to learn how to think, research, and collaborate. This is because we are preparing our students for a 21st century world. As was mentioned before, we are preparing our students for a job unlike any we have ever seen because it hasn't been created. I work in a low-income school district, and I want my students to have the same opportunities as everyone else. This is why I'm here to support the draft standards and not the standards proposed in item 5D. This is because a checklist of opportunities is really not an opportunity at all. To call it traditional standards makes it seem as though it's hearkening back to something we love. However, not all traditions are able to sustain us into the future. By looking at standards such as the draft standards that allow us to help our students utilize each of our contents as a lens for the type of thinking they will do in all aspects of our lives, helps prepare them for a future that they can succeed in. I ask you to consider what is best for the future success of Arizona and the people who will one day be able to sit in your seats. Thank you.
Katie Hansen, followed by Ms. Sanderson.
Good morning. My name is Katie Hansen, and I am a nationally board certified social studies educator. And the last 4 years, I've been supporting a school district as a social studies specialist. More importantly, I'm a parent of 3 elementary school age students. And really, when I think about what do I want both for my students as an educator and for my children as a parent, it's very much to have the opportunity to take what they know that they've learned in class and apply it to the challenges of today's world. Our world is ever changing, and you could say that history and science don't change, but the way we use them and what we need them to do very much do. It is our responsibility as educators to really think about how can we best give them the skills at school and outside of the classroom to think about where they live, where they're going, and what they want to do with the rest of their lives. The draft standards that Arizona educators have worked collaboratively to draft over the last couple years really provide an opportunity for teachers to challenge their kids to think about what they know and why they know it and what they might do with that information. It challenges students to think about how do I fit and how can I use what I've learned towards an event that happened yesterday or may happen in their future lives, both as employees and both as just citizens. The minute they walk outside of our classrooms, no matter what age they are citizens. They are members of our communities, and they really need to have that knowledge and skill set to think about that as they progress on in our communities. So I thank you very much for considering the adoption of the standards that have been written by Arizona educators for Arizona students. Thank you so much.
Ms. Sanderson, followed by Kathleen O'Neill.
Fine. It's a tough one. Hi, good morning again. My name is Svea Anderson. Thank you for the recognition this morning for the Presidential Award as a finalist. I'm incredibly proud to be a teacher. I love what I do. I'm wearing many hats today. I am an educator. I am the district STEM coordinator for the Tanque Verde Unified School District in Tucson, and my most proud, I'm a mom. A few years ago, I was introduced to the document, A Framework for K-12 Science Education. I was in a group that spent a year conducting a book study on it. That document, based on research for best science teaching practices, profoundly changed the way that I teach science. I had always thought that I had a hands-on inquiry-based approach to teaching, but the introduction of the 3 dimensions to the DCIs, to the cross-cutting concepts, to the science and engineering practices, inspired me to take my teaching to the next level. The 3-dimensional approach in science education encourages students to think critically, analyze data, and communicate their results, just to name a few of the practices. I just got back from a 3.5-week expedition in the Arctic as a polar trek educator. Toolik Field Station is the epicenter of Arctic research in the United States. While I was there, I was surrounded by researchers from around the world, from Sweden and Italy, France, Germany, and universities from across the United States. At Toolik, I witnessed science, research, and action from lead PIs, of NSF grants to PhD candidates to master students to undergrads. The experience reiterated the fact that science education and the draft standards that I believe in and the 3-dimensional approach is critical in giving our students in Arizona the foundations needed to be part of real-world science and research. My hope is that the 3-dimensional foundation is not only for the students in my classroom, but ultimately for all the students in Arizona. Thank you.
Kathleen O'Neill, followed by Stephen Williamson.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. For years, we've watched you, Superintendent, insert your personal beliefs and values on the entire state as you've misused statutes to attempt to shift your failures, routinely blame staff and previous administration for your complete and total leadership failures to the citizens of Arizona, teachers, the parents, and most importantly, the students. A few recent headlines as examples include the $30 million in federal money spent wrongly in schools that you blame on a previous administration and that you're calling on a future administration to fix. The problem is that we have current students who don't have access to those funds. As a citizen, I attempted to file a complaint with 3 different bodies regarding one of these next examples. You are on multiple video records using ARS 15511 to speak about the use of public funds to influence an election, yet your solution when your office published an internal newsletter telling staff to vote for you was to fire the author of the newsletter. In schools, the leader is held accountable for training on all state laws. Apparently, that's not the case according to this body. The Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and this body all refused to accept my complaint. You are responsible for the training of your staff on all laws. Diane, the people have spoken. It's time for you to clean up the mess that's been created. Stop inserting your beliefs on our children. Finally, according to ARS 16-1019H, a candidate has 15 days following an election to remove campaign signs. Start practicing what you preach. Follow the law. I have filed code enforcement violations with the City of Surprise in Maricopa County. I will continue to file these violations in every jurisdiction when I find your signs. So stop wasting my taxpayer dollars on science and social studies standards that fine educators across the state have been paid to create. Ms. Douglas, it's time for you to follow Arizona Science Standard S3C1 PO3 as it relates to the environment and actually spend your time cleaning up your mess. Thank you for your time.
Stephen Williamson, followed by Chris Cotterman.
Well, that is the criticism, and I won't dignify certainly many of those misrepresentations with a comment.
You just did.
Good morning, Board. My name is Stephen Williamson. I've spent the last 24 years working with Arizona students and the last 2 years working with Arizona teachers in the Scottsdale Unified School District as a social studies lead. I'm here to talk about going forward with the new standards that have been put in place. These standards are much more rigorous and will lead to more rigorous teaching. More of a focus on developing disciplinary skills are critical thinking, analysis, synthesis, and inquiry. I was one of the more than 100 teachers from across the state that have come together to create these great standards. We've had input from outside organizations and several technical reviews. The new standards will help teachers move from telling history to doing history, moving away from a PO list of checking off to having students actually taking informed action using our C3 inquiry. The idea of creating both the civic education and the idea of democracy today is an important thing that social studies teachers can do. It's long overdue that we get new standards. 2005 was a long time ago. If I look back at, my mom started teaching in 1965 in New Jersey, and she could look at these standards and say, that's what I did. I just finished reading a book called The Innovator's Mindset. It had a saying, change is the opportunity to do something amazing. You have the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Next up, we have Chris Cotterman, followed by Mandy Heel.
Morning, Mr. President, members. For the record, Chris Cotterman, Director of Government Relations for the Arizona School Boards Association. Arizona School Boards Association is here today to offer support for the work of Arizona educators, led by Arizona Department of Education staff who have worked for years to revise Arizona's science, history, and social science standards. These standards have not been revised in 13 years and are long overdue for an update. ASBA believes the fundamental concepts which are part of the prevailing scientific literature must be taught, and those that are not do not belong in the public K-12 classroom. This is vital to protecting the integrity of public education. Because of its compulsory nature, K-12 public education must do two things and do them well. Teach students the current state of the prevailing scientific literature and provide them with the analytical skills to continue to evaluate evidence to draw their own conclusions as scientific understanding continues to evolve through the rest of their lives. Unfortunately, the revision of these standards, the history and social science standards, and the English language arts standards before them, have been caught up in battles over curriculum, that is, which resources and texts will be used to teach students the concepts outlined in the standards, which is the exclusive purview of Arizona's locally elected governing boards. The fundamental mission of history and social sciences is to provide context for the moment we are living in today and give students the ability to understand and interpret the world around them as they move through life. It is our opinion that the Hillsdale scope and sequence before you for discussion today constitutes more curriculum than standards. The document recommends the order in which concepts should be taught and provides recommended texts with which to teach and advances a specific academic tradition. These are hallmarks of curriculum, not standards. In closing, ASBA urges you to respect the work of Arizona educators and adhere to the guiding principle that has served Arizona for over 100 years. Trust that Arizona educators know Arizona best and the years of work they have put in on behalf of Arizona students. Thank you.
Mandy Heel, followed by Becky Hill.
Good morning. I'm Mandy Heel, and I'm one of the finalists that was recognized today. We live in an information world. Things are constantly changing, especially in science. And we can no longer, when we can have an encyclopedia at our fingertips, we can no longer learn a list of scientific facts because they're constantly changing. As technology changes, these scientific facts will change even more rapidly. A list is not sufficient for our Arizona students. The draft standards infuse the three dimensions of scientific instruction into each standard. This has revolutionized my teaching. As I have striven to apply those three dimensions every day at school, my students have become more engaged in scientific thought. They are more enthusiastic about coming to class, and they're learning to argument from actual evidence, not from opinion. Students are learning to fit the new science that they are learning, the new facts that they are presented, into what they already know. For example, this summer I was emailed by a student, and he said, "Did you hear about the helicopter they're going to send to Mars? How can they do that? Because the atmosphere is so thin." We had talked about atmosphere in 6th grade. He was applying what he had already learned in class to new scientific content that he had learned over the summer. We had a great discussion of questions through email, and he researched and found that the revolution of the blades has to be 300 times faster on Mars because of the thin atmosphere. This questioning, this probing comes from the three dimensions, and that is what the new draft standards include. Thank you for your time.
Becky Hill, followed by Dr. Bob Branch.
Good morning, Mr. President, Superintendent Douglas, members of the board. Becky Hill with the Arizona Chamber of Commerce this morning. To begin, we would like to express our support for staying the course on the current 3 through 8 in high school cut scores. This is a much more rigorous bar than pre-AZ merit cut scores, and it makes sense to have some stability here while we are working on integrating menu and ensuring we're doing all we can to identify school impact, particularly for schools narrowing and closing the achievement gap. While these refinements are underway, staying with the current cut score makes sense. However, while the A and B scales show improvement over prior generations, we would encourage some discussion about C and D letter grades going forward. The bar to present a school as average is flirting with what would be failing on a traditional scale, and this deserves some discussion. We are grateful for your Chief Accountability Officer's efforts to manage this A through F evolution and the broad inclusive group that is at the table. Lastly, science standards. The next generation science standards have been embraced and developed by science educators and scientists alike. They are endorsed by aerospace and IT innovators all over the country. We should have a really good reason to deviate, particularly when our state's own educators have stood to support them. Thank you.
Dr. Bob Branch, followed by Mark Jornstad.
Mr. President, Secretary Douglas, and board members, I am Dr. Bob Branch. I'm a subject matter expert in several different fields, including leadership, business, information system technology, and education. I've designed curriculum and programs in the bachelor level, master's degree level, and doctorate level. I teach at Grand Canyon University, where I've taught many of our superintendents, principals, and thousands of our teachers in this state as they're on their pursuit to get their doctorate in education degree. I am well published in the field of education, and I fully support Superintendent Douglas recommendation for the Barney Charter School initiative, scope, and sequence. I want to applaud the board for adopting new standards after all these years. Congratulations, and I hope that you make the right decision. Thank you very much.
Mark Jorgenstad, followed by Tia Andrade.
Good morning, President Narducci, Vice President Corr, Superintendent Douglas, members of the board. I'm Dr. Mark Jorgenstad, Executive Director of the Arizona School Administrators, whose 1,400 members have the honor of working with students, parents, teachers, community members to develop safe, welcoming, effective, and collaborative environments for Arizona's 1.1 million students. For the last 18 months, Arizona's Department of Education has very effectively and professionally led 2 parallel groups of educators developing social studies standards and science standards. Now that this process is coming to the finish line, it's time to honor the practices that and the outcomes that these groups have produced. You've heard other speakers very effectively describe what they've done, so I will not go into that. However, we're at the finish line now, and it is the administrators and the educators of this state fervent hope that you will honor the work that has been done by those groups, bring this to a conclusion so our districts, our charter schools can move forward with training and materials to support those standards. Thank you.
Thea Andrade, followed by Jennifer Reynolds.
Good morning, President Narducci, board members. My name is Thea Andrade, and I work as an executive director for the Phoenix Union High School District. As you know, there was a change made to the CCRI impacting 20% of the model. Schools were asked to include all seniors, and as a result, the data did drop across high schools across the state. So the impact is pretty clear in the data. The old cut scores would impact Phoenix Union schools tremendously. I'm here to advocate for option 2. While I understand that option 1 is enticing to Arizona and to several schools, elementary especially, they'll receive more A's. For the vast majority, though, there are more D's, more F's, and fewer B's. So what will I tell our schools when their scores didn't drop, but they're now a D? What they're going to ask us, what did we do wrong? And I have no answer for them. It's just simply new cut scores. Given that we're in a transition year to the menu and new cuts will be established next year, I'd like to suggest perhaps an unorthodox but bold move on the board where you adopt a hold harmless year and allow schools to go with whichever cut score benefits their school improvement and their spirit of growth. Holding high schools, especially to the old cut scores, it would just simply misinform students, teachers, and the public, when in fact the schools may not have done any worse. You may be saying, well, that probably violates ESSA, but I'm not sure that's for a year a bigger issue than the impact it will give to our schools. Thank you for your consideration.
Jennifer Reynolds, followed by Superintendent Betsy Hargrove.
Members of the SBE, President Narducci, Superintendent Douglas, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Jennifer Reynolds. I'm from Mommy Lobby AZ, and I would like to remind everyone in this room why we should be here today. For our children's future and not to promote our own agendas. They are the future leaders of this country. There were no public hearings on these August 2018 drafts for science and history or social studies, and yet again we are trying to hurry and rush their adoption. These standards are not rich in our American heritage and will not prepare our students for STEM. And for the record, we are a constitutional republic, not a democracy. We continue to see developmentally inappropriate standards, especially in kindergarten through 5th grade in these August drafts. Neither the science standards nor the history standards were reviewed by any well-known developmental psychologist, like Jean Piaget, for example, and to determine if the students can actually perform what they're being asked to do. Children below age 11 cannot think abstractly, strategize, persevere, or apply one concept to another. A large number of these standards do not meet the criteria for clarity and appropriate cognitive demand. Instead, a new Appendix 6 was created in the science standards, and the things that we called out as developmentally appropriate were put back in the back of the document. The history and social science standards continue to fail to honor the widely held understanding of childhood development and require children to explain, compare, generate, justify, and apply principles that are abstract in nature. The kindergarten through third grade standards are devoid of teaching any history, which would be the necessary background knowledge for future grade levels and can lead to decreased literacy skills. In addition, most of the citizenship standards can be better met in all grades by actually teaching history. My recommendation to the board is to not vote or call for a vote for these standards next month. We are failing a generation of kids by continually adopting standards that will not prepare them for their futures. We should instead allow our local LEAs to choose the standards that best meet their school philosophy, a menu of standards. This is true local control, and this is what our founders established. Thank you.
President Narducci,
could I just interject?
Just
in light of the time, I'm sorry. Let's take one more comment, and then we'll break for 10, and then we'll come back.
We were thinking the same thing.
Well, very good. Thank you.
So the last one for now until the break is Superintendent Betsy Hargrove, and then after the break, we will follow with Ron Russell.
Good morning. Thank you, President Narducci, members of the Governing Board. I appreciate the time to be able to come and speak relative to 5A. I just want to share my story, my history here in Arizona. I came here about 22 years ago, and my first opportunity with this level of standards and accountability happened when I was a third-year principal. I was at one site and was asked to go to another site, received a call in about September, October, and the superintendent said at the time, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "The school you left was the first excelling school named in Arizona with the level of demographics that we have in our district." And I said, "That's exciting, that's wonderful, and certainly well-deserved of the work that had happened there with an incredible group of educators and students." He asked me then, "Are you still sitting down?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Well," he said, "the school that you are currently principal of has been labeled underperforming." I said, "Okay, we're up for the challenge." Because what I will tell you is that receiving that first bit of information was an incredible excitement and celebration of the work that has happened with that group. The second part, though, having to go to a group of educators who, quite frankly, could not identify the "what did we do wrong" piece of it, was an incredible demoralization. And we had to regroup around the work that we were doing and reset what was happening in our classrooms every single day. We are continuing to live that out 20 years later. We are continuing not to know what that bar is, what that target is. And I just implore the Governing Board to be able to make a decision that will allow us to be able to set goals, allow our children to know what that goal is, and to be able to celebrate the amazing things that are happening in our schools every day. Thank you.
Ten-minute break, so we'll reconvene at 10:40.
10:40.
Thank you. Just a 1 minute notice. We're going to reconvene in 1 minute. Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a long. Yeah, we do 4 and 4 things. How many?
Mr. Baden, are we ready, you think? Or should we wait?
Mr. President and members, no, we can get started.
Okay, we'll reconvene. It's approximately 10:42, and looks like we have a quorum, so we're set to go. We'll recommence with public comment.
Mr. President and members, first up we have Ron Russell, followed by Vanessa Snyder.
Hello, and thank you very much for your time today. I'm Ron Russell. I am a Buddhist, humanist, hospice volunteer here in the Valley, and believe very strongly in the educational system of Arizona. I'm a father of 3. Just had a boy ship off to the Marines this morning. But what is and what may, I wish to address the idea of common ancestry. There's a lot of difference between 2 + 2 is 4 and 2 + 2 may be 4. There's no ambiguity in hard scientific facts which state that the Earth is older than 6,000 to 10,000 years. There's no room for ambiguity around science and evolution standards that we teach our children, and hiding behind that is one of those cornerstones of science, that idea of striving and failure that is evolution. We've all been taught some pretty strange things that we were growing up. Don't let the kids of Arizona reflect back on their education as something they need to unlearn based on a particular religious dogma. Thank you.
Vanessa Snyder, followed by Devin Del Palcino.
Mr. President, Superintendent Douglas, members of the Board of Education, good morning. My name is Vanessa Snyder. I am a mother of 3 children that go to school in Mesa, Arizona, and I am here to express my very grave concern over these proposed science standards. As many people have already pointed out today, over 100 Arizona teachers and science content experts wrote the new standards. The Department of Education chose to water down and contort these standards until they are nearly unrecognizable. The language specifically surrounding evolution and climate change has been weakened to the point of being laughable. Our students deserve a complete, unbiased, fact-based science education that prepares them both for the future and for being members of our ever-growing global society. Members of the board, I implore you to think of our students and give them the fact-based education they deserve. These standards will likely be used for years to come and should reflect established scientific fact. I respectfully request that you reject these standards until they are revised to include the changes suggested by our respected teachers and scientific community. Thank you.
Devin Del Palcio.
Director Williams, just one moment. We have some folks in front of the doors that I'd like them to move in a little bit so the door is free, if possible. And we welcome you. We welcome you. I just want you to be comfortable. Come on in. So somehow I know that we can arrange for it. There's enough chairs and people in here. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. I want you to feel comfortable.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, there we go.
Devin Del Palcino.
Devin.
Thank you so much.
No, Devin. Superintendent Wyman, will you go into the other room over there and see if there's a Devin? While I wait, we'll move on to Eileen Merritt. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Eileen Merritt, and I'm a teacher science educator at Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at ASU. I participated in the development of the science standards. Scientists from different disciplines provided content expertise, and teachers from around the state carefully deliberated about the language and progression of the standards based on their vast knowledge and experience working with students. I'm concerned that important ideas about climate change were removed from the most recent draft of the standards. These recent changes seem short-sighted and show a disregard for the careful process used by the working group. Let me be clear about the language that was removed specifically. This Earth Science standard was removed. Analyze geoscience data and the results from global climate change models to make evidence-based predictions of the current rate and scale of global or regional climate changes. Also removed, the idea that science and engineering will be essential both to understanding the possible impacts of global climate change and to informing decisions about how to slow its rate and consequences for humanity as well as for the rest of the planet. While removing a few sentences may seem inconsequential, the ripple effects are enormous. Climate change is one of the most pressing problems we face in society today. The scientific research community has found clear evidence that human activities accelerate climate change. We owe it to the next generation to include standards that will help them understand causes and impacts of climate change so that they can take action. Our children and grandchildren are counting on us to get this right. I encourage board members to trust the educators and scientists who drafted the standards and insist that the language suggested by ASTA is included in the adopted standards. Thanks for the work you do on behalf of our students.
Andrea Thaler, followed by Margaret Welch.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Superintendent Douglas, members of the board and staff, thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I'm here to encourage you to reject the proposed standards that include creationism in the science curriculum for two reasons. The first is that Arizona is not exclusively a Christian state. Before Christians even arrived here, the Navajos were here, the Hopis were here, as well as scores of other indigenous peoples who do not subscribe to the Christian creationism story. If we include creationism, the Christian creationism in the science standard, we also have to include the Hopi, we have to include the Navajo, we have to include our Hindu friends and neighbors' creation story. None of it belongs in a science classroom for the second reason that creationism just simply is not science. Science is about making testable predictions. Creationism has yet to make one single hypothesis that can be tested to provide predictions for the future. For those two reasons, I encourage you to reject the creationism aspects of the proposed standards. Thank you.
Margaret Welch, followed by Reverend David Felton.
Good morning, Mr. President, board members, and Superintendent Douglas. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts on the Arizona Science Standards. My name is Margaret Welch. I just retired from teaching biology after 26 years at Tucson High and TUSD. During my teaching career, I established an honors research methods program. I started the CTE biotech program and initiated several summer research programs for students which are still ongoing. Many of my students have won international awards or have won awards at international competitions and have been co-authors on scientific peer-reviewed papers. As a result of their amazing work, I received an honorary doctorate from the College of Science at the University of Arizona. And I say this only to establish my expertise, my commitment to and passion for science education. I like to think that I spent my career doing science and that my students spent their time doing science. So I asked the State Board of Education to adopt the most comprehensive and correct science standards possible. Establishing up-to-date science standards will support working conditions for our teachers and learning opportunities for our students. I agree with many of the previous speakers, but particularly Danielle Hogan, who recommended adoption of the next generation science standards. But if that is not possible, I support the Arizona Science Teacher Association recommendations regarding revision of the proposed science standards. 4 standards on teaching climate change. Wow, that was fast. Please support the AST recommendations. Thank you very much for your time.
Reverend David Felton, followed by Karen McClellan.
Good morning. I'm Reverend David Felton. I'm a United Methodist pastor in Fountain Hills, Arizona. I'm also the member of the Greater Phoenix Board of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, and I'm also a parent of 2 middle school children here in Phoenix. I stand here today to oppose the changes that are being made or suggested to the science standards from a religious tradition. I'm proud to belong to a denomination, the United Methodist denomination, who on a global level have indicated that we believe that evolution is something that needs to be promoted, that it is not, in fact, in conflict with the Bible. And as a local United Methodist denomination here in Arizona, our regional body 2 years ago passed a resolution that's tens of thousands of Methodists here in this state who have agreed that not only is evolution something that needs to be taught in our schools, that it is not in conflict with the Bible, but that we are needed to oppose the teaching of creationism and intelligent design in our schools on a religious basis. It's one of the things that's not being discussed by all of my erstwhile science and secular colleagues here today is the religious problem here, because this isn't just a question between religion and science. It's a question about differences between how we interpret the Bible. And as someone who has spent his life studying the Bible, who has been trained in academia to study with a critical eye, I can tell you that the biblical texts that fundamentalists and evangelicals use to support this view, and incidentally on that, this board is about to take the advice of people who believe the earth was created in 6 days and the earth is only 6,000 years old. So I'm not sure that the grasp of time is actually accurate here in objective ways. So I'm going to continue and say that if any of you are Presbyterian or Roman Catholic or Episcopalian or any of the mainline denominations, I am certain that your denominations as well stand with the United Methodist Church and tens of thousands of Christians across this state who would oppose what is the incremental effort of conservative religious voices trying to influence our secular and civic science standards in this state. It goes on, and it is just an effort to wheedle their way into our public society. And I, for one, as a parent and as a religious person and as a religious leader, ask you to definitely oppose the suggested changes made to the science standards on a religious and theological basis. Bad pedagogy, bad theology. Thank you.
Karen McClellan, followed by Eric. Last name starts with a Z, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it.
Good morning, Mr. President, Superintendent Douglas, and board members. My name is Karen McClellan, and I've been on the school board in Sedona Oak Creek for 16 years, and I'll be starting my 5th term in January. I came down here from Sedona, though, on my own behalf. This was important enough to drive down and be sure to make some comments here. Looking at the things on both items 5C and 5D, we all know we live in a global world. Our students need the facts of science, they need the tools, they need to learn the history and the culture of the whole world to be productive citizens. So we just 2 brief comments, because I agree with almost everyone else has said. I urge you not to accept the recent revisions to the science standards. We need to have science standards that place evolution and climate change and science facts in a prominent location. And I also just urge rejecting even a discussion of the standards from Hillsdale. As Chris Cotterman said earlier, that's a curriculum, not a standard in any event, and the board is to issue standards, not to write curriculum for our schools. But those are coming from a very politically conservative, religiously conservative school with a Eurocentric sort of base. to the world. We need our students to have equal emphasis on the rest of the world to be able to participate in what's going on. So I urge you to accept all the comments made here today by the teachers who are experts in pedagogy and experts in their own fields, and we need to accept their views because that's what our students need for the future. Thank you.
Eric Z. You'll have to let us know how you pronounce that last name. And Rebecca Hinton.
Hey, thank you for listening to me. I'm Eric Zaklakevich, and I'll just keep it pretty to the point. I'm just a member of the general public who stays current on these things, and I'd just like to add my voice to the chorus, asking that the K-12 science standards be sent back for further revision, and that the voices of the respected scientific community be taken more into consideration when coming up with the next revision. And that's just coming from a place of feeling that I think students deserve to be taught what leaders in the field they're studying are actually teaching. And it's my understanding that the theory of common ancestry in particular, that's taught as a matter of fact at the college level, and that understanding that theory is critical if somebody wants to have success in a wide range of scientific fields. So I just like our science standards to reflect that so that our young Arizonans have the best possible head start after high school. Thank you very much.
Rebecca Hinton, followed by Corey Hellmeyer.
Good morning, members of the board and public. My name is Rebecca Hinton. I'm a volunteer with Sierra Club and here today on behalf of Climate Parents. I'm here to, my husband and I are both parents and scientists. I'm here to present a petition signed by more than 850 other parents and science supporters. The petition states, "Dear members of the board, we respectfully call upon you to reject the proposed K-12 science standards and return them to the Department of Education with instructions to review, revise, and further improve them, in particular with respect to their treatment of climate change. Students must not be kept in the dark about evidence-based climate science. They need a real-world, 21st century science education that includes climate science. Evidence of human-caused climate change is overwhelming, and teaching fact-based climate science to K-12 students is just as essential as other geosciences. At a time when the impacts of climate change, like extreme storms, severe droughts, and catastrophic wildfires are escalating, all students have the right to be taught accurate scientific evidence about what is causing climate change and what they can do about it. Reject the proposed science standards until they are revised to restore accurate information about evidence-based climate change. Climate parents only recently learned of the alteration of the science standards. We are very alarmed that the integrity of science education is being undermined relative to evolution and climate change. Our students deserve a 21st century science education that includes climate science. An evidence-based science education will help our students prepare for college and prepare them to innovate the client and clean energy solutions we are all counting on. Thank you.
Corey Hellmeyer, followed by Tori Roberg.
Mr. President, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to be here. My name is Corey Gelmier, and while I am not a parent, nor a teacher, nor a scientist, I am a property owner in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I fully understand the importance of schools and good quality public education to our property values, as well as the fact that these children, when they grow up, are going to be developing personal habits and policies that will impact me when I need leaders. So I want children to learn accurate, science-based facts. I want them to be able to grow up and lead with information that relates to the world and how it actually operates. So I strongly suggest that the K-12 standards for science be sent back and amended with the recommendations that were originally there with respect to climate change. And I'm also very concerned that Arizona as a whole is gaining great visibility for our lack of public education, our lack of quality in public education, and our seeming interest in not allowing science to be included in their education, as well as the concerning edition of creationism in public schools. There is an absolute case for the separation of public and state and public. So I urge you to reconsider those standards and take a look at climate change and creationism. Thank you.
Tori Roberg, followed by Tara Gennaro.
Hi, good morning. My name is Tori Roberg. I'm here on behalf of the Secular Coalition for Arizona. I'm also here as a parent of a 3rd grader and a 7th grader. Enough is enough. Arizona's children deserve a science education based on facts, not religious dogma. Let me be clear. There is no place for religious dogma in science class. None. We know that watering down evolution in our state's science standards that will be before you today, it doesn't just discount the consensus reached by 98% of scientists, it also ignores the expertise, knowledge, training, and hard work of the group of science educators who gave the department, rather, a draft last November. That draft was tampered with, and then public comments ensued. I was one of those public commenters back in April. We had a committee appointed to finalize the evolution standards, which included a young Earth creationist. Why do we have a young Earth creationist as one of 7 people to review the evolution science standards? It doesn't make any sense. So I'm here today to urge you, please, send those standards back. Send them back and make the revisions to make it accurate. We need accurate science. We have reviewed and we support the Arizona Science Teachers Association letter that they wrote to you with their revisions. If those revisions were included, we feel that the science standards would be very good. Thank you.
Tara Gennaro, followed by Barbara Willie.
Hi, Mr. President, members of the board. My name is Tara Guerrero, and I am a curriculum coordinator for Crane Elementary School District, all the way from Yuma. So I'm happy to be here this morning. Thank you. So it's come to our attention that the State Board of Education may entertain the idea of throwing out the science and social studies standards work that Arizona educators have spent much time and effort to develop, and possibly look at a curriculum that has been crafted by a single school district. We would like to voice our concern about this decision. Crane School District has been a member of the Science and Social Studies Math and ELA collaborative standard work groups that the Arizona Department of Education has brought together over the past few years. For over a year, our science and social studies experts have traveled to Phoenix and participated in this collaborative learning initiative. Other educators in our district also engaged in providing feedback on the drafts in order to show their support and engage in the process of refinement. It is both disheartening and demoralizing to hear that this body of work that Arizona educators have committed to may be dismissed by the adoption of a single school district's curriculum. We encourage you as a whole to support the work and expertise of the collaborative teams who have created innovative and rigorous science and social studies standards by not looking to a single district-generated curriculum. Thank you so much for your time.
Barbara Willie, followed by Rick Guttridge.
Superintendent Douglas and State Board of Education. I'm not a teacher. I'm just a citizen, a grandmother, a parent. And you've got a heck of a responsibility here. In my humble opinion, there is a movement about to teach history, true American history. And I don't think there's a person in this room that hasn't seen something on television where a student, usually college, is asked a question that all of us would know the answers to. So I totally support the Barney Charter School from Hillsdale College standards. They've been doing it for years. Why do we have to recreate the wheel? It's there. Let's look at it seriously. And thank you for all of what you're doing.
Rick Guttridge, followed by Corinne Haynes.
President Narducci, members of the board, Superintendent Douglas. First, thank you, Diane, for all the efforts you put in to try to fix the mess that Arizona education has become. My name is Rick Guttridge, and for perspective, I have a Bachelor of Science in Engineering Physics from the University of Arizona and over 30 years experience working in research and development in the aerospace industry. Our understanding of the world we live in is owed directly to the critical thinking skills one develops by practicing the scientific method. Any of the real problems that we face in public education today will not be solved by deviating from that proven approach. I've reviewed the proposed Arizona science standards, and I urge you reject them. They closely follow the next generation science standards, which minimize the teaching of fact, of scientific fact, in exchange for emphasis on process and modeling. I submit you can't begin to think critically if you don't have a deep store of facts in your head. Both versions of the standards undermine the scientific method and can easily result in students learning things that are simply wrong. Many parents rightly believe that charter schools are their children's only escape to a future with promise. As public schools drift farther and farther from classic history, math, and science instruction, confidence in them goes away and charter school enrollments go up. Forcing charters away from classic instruction by the imposition of next generation-like standards will have the same adverse impact on them. Please don't go down that path. Instead, consider adopting the classically liberal Barney Charter School standards, which are standards, not curriculum. They're a lot like what we used to have in Arizona, which were actually pretty good standards at one point. Even a cursory review will find that they're superior standards for Arizona's public schools. Thank you.
Corinne Haynes, followed by Barbara Reinert.
Good morning, Board President, members of the State Board of Education, and Superintendent of Public Instruction, Diane Douglas. It has become alarmingly evident that we are now a nation without its sense of history. What unites us as Americans has been under attack in our educational system for decades, and we are now experiencing the consequences. Our American story should be taught forthrightly and proudly in our schools, beginning in kindergarten. The movement, I feel, is here. No matter where I turn, I hear from everybody. Our kids are not being taught history. They don't know how our government works. They don't know our founding. So I think it's time for Arizona to take the lead in developing K-8 comprehensive history standards that stand alone as its own discipline and not watered down in a plethora of topics under the guise of social studies. So, in my opinion, and I forgot to say, I am a mom, a grandma, and a retired school teacher in Arizona in the public school system, but most affectionately known among all my friends and kids as the grassroots grandma. And I love the idea of looking at the Hillsdale standards. I think they've been time-tested. They're great. I think we should at least take a look at them and give Arizona the chance to make an excellent and exceptional move, I think, in turning around what's been happening in our country for far too long. Thank you.
Barbara Reinert, followed by Kristen Williamson.
Good morning, Superintendent Douglas and board members. My name is Barb Reiner. I come here with lots of different hats today, but I want to start out saying this. First of all, I want to commend the ADE for the way they put this process together. The 110 of us that worked on these standards were led into a great direction using the three-dimensional teaching and learning for science standards. It was a privilege to be part of that, and I really commend ADA for their role in this. My first role, I'm coming to you as the Central Regional Facilitator of the Azella Group. And we want to reiterate what you heard from ASTA. We also recommend those 4 modifications and feel we could move forward with the draft. The second reason I come to you as a curriculum specialist for Scottsdale Unified School District, I would like our over 20,000 students to be benefited from these new standards. I would love my teachers to be able to teach these standards. It's best education in science practices. The third reason I come to you, I have 9 grandkids in this state of Arizona, and I want my grandchildren. I would never put forth anything or support anything if it didn't benefit my grandchildren and all the children of Arizona. And lastly, I am a homeowner, a taxpayer. If we want to continue to bring this economy with the tech businesses to this state, we have got to provide good science education in this state. I was very fortunate this year in June. I was in South Korea teaching the teachers at Camp Humphreys, which is the largest Army base in this world, teaching their teachers about 3-dimensional. If it's good enough for our military kids and the military's adopting it, I urge us to do the same for Arizona. Thank you.
Kristen Williamson, followed by Bruce Jones.
Yes, hi, good morning. I just wanted to reiterate a point that was made earlier a few moments ago, that I was part of, or at least intended to be part of, the community working group regarding the social studies standards. And I had originally, about a year ago, tried to get involved by directly working with Tammy Waller at the Department of Education, filling out the appropriate forms and so forth. And I was never contacted through the despite months of repeated emails and follow-up. And so when the social studies standards came out in March, I was concerned that there was only a database ability to comment line item by line item on the individual standards. And so what I did was I took the entire document and assessed it and prepared an analysis as the totality of what was put out by the Department of Education working group. And since there wasn't anyone to really submit that to, I submitted it to Diane Douglas. And what was communicated in the document was, what I noted was, at the elementary school level was where they put forth the arguments for liberty and free markets when the children are 10 and 11 years old and much too young to understand the arguments, like I said, for liberty. They're not going to be reading the Federalist Papers. They're not going to be reading de Tocqueville or Blackstone. Then when the Department of Education employees went to the middle school time period, they had the kids focus on what was more considered logistic civics by looking at the civics requirements by state statute. High school then merged into controversial chit-chat about opinion-based pop culture, which is what I see in my son's school district in Scottsdale Unified School District. Much of the discussion is around non-academic content, very political in nature. We talk about guns, we talk about all kinds of things that do not relate to academic content. The C3 framework ushers in much more of this because they specifically request that children not talk about foundational American principles, but instead merge content into political narratives and then take that into informed action. And that is very, very much concerning because you will usher in a lot more political narratives into the conversation, which is exactly what I see in my son's school district. And I have communicated this for a year, and I have a 50-page complaint with the Attorney General and the Department of Education currently sitting in there. Thank you.
Bruce Jones, followed by Jonathan Roloff.
Thank you. Good morning, President Narducci, Director Williams, and Superintendent Douglas, and members of the board. I stood before you earlier this spring representing the Arizona Science Teachers, Arizona Science Education Leadership Association, as Barb talked this morning. And today, I'm here. I'm the current president of the Arizona Science Teachers Association. You've already had the chance to hear from a number of our current and former board members, as well as members of some of our organization groups that are the science ambassadors who take science education principles out to the classrooms. So we already have provided you a letter, but I just really wanted to thank you for your responsiveness. When I came last April, there were serious concerns that we had about the process, and I'm really grateful for the clarity and the openness that have been evident at the Department of Ed since then, that have brought us these current documents. You already have our standing as an organization on the changes that we'd like to see going forward, and I just wanted to reiterate for you the readiness that we have. We're ready to support implementation of quality science standards here in Arizona, so we're grateful for your consideration of our recommendations. And just since we know this isn't a voting period, just to think about in the future, the idea of timelines. One of the requests that we had earlier in the spring was that there might be some extension in the timelines based on implementation and new testing and such. And so that's something to think through as we head toward adoption of new standards. So thank you very much.
Jonathan Roloff, followed by Lillian Owen.
Good morning, President Narducci, Superintendent Douglas, members of the board. First of all, I want to thank you guys for all the time you've put forward in the A through F process, specifically Member Baker and Member Taylor, who go way back years when they first started this process. I'm the Data and Research Director for the Fowler Elementary School District, a Title I school district in Southwest Phoenix. First of all, I'd like to echo the commentary by Dr. Hightower and Dr. Hargrove today about the excellent things that happen and the well-rounded education provided in the Southwest Valley. In addition to a well-rounded education, I don't want to shortcut or shortchange the excellence of the academic education that we provide. Yes, we do provide a well-rounded, but we also provide an academic excellent education. With that said, you will see in your board packet today that there's a correlation between socioeconomics and letter grades. I know one of the founding principles that we started the A through F on was that there would not be a correlation between socioeconomics and letter grades. And as you can see by graphs, there's a clear correlation where schools in Title I districts have an uphill battle to get a B, nonetheless an A. With that being said, I want it to be in the forefront in the board's decisions and considerations when setting cut scores and future A through F iterations, that we take this into consideration again, so we're not judging schools based on how we get our kids, but what we do when we have our kids. Thank you.
Lillian Owen, followed by Dr. Greg Wyman.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here today as a parent and a teacher, high school teacher, and a citizen of Arizona. I'm a product of Arizona Public Schools, elementary through university to master's. I have a bachelor's in biology. I teach science. I teach and computer science. I'm really here because I was concerned about the Hillsdale model. That's what brought me here today. I took a personal day to be here. I'm not necessarily representing my district. I don't want to go on forever because a lot of people have mentioned things that I agree with. I'm supporting the standards that have been developed over the last 18 months. I don't think they're the best choice, so I will say that too. I think the next gen standards are the best choice for Arizona and for our future, but we have a sort of spirit in Arizona to be independent thinkers, and I don't think that everybody could agree on those, the next gen. So I believe that the standards that we put together in committee and came to through consensus are the best choice for Arizona. I want us to have doctors and engineers, nurses, science teachers who can care for our state. And I wish that people would not be so fearful of the word evolution and what it means, and conceptual thinking, which is what is part of the new standards. Okay. Thank you very much.
Last up, we have Dr. Greg Wyman.
Good morning, President Narducci, Superintendent Douglas. Thank you, board members. My name is Greg Wyman. I'm the superintendent up in Payson. I'm going to talk to you about a slightly different topic. I'd like to look at 5B, the appeals process. As I read the draft business rules, I notice that you can't appeal any results based on data. I'm a little surprised about that. I know we got a static file in July, but that static file is without context. When we're taking a look, I'm going to give you a specific example. When we're taking a look at our results based on what was released last week for our letter grades, we had been under the assumption that our schools all tested at 95%. We had diligently made sure all our schools tested at 95%. And we're shocked and amazed when we looked at the data on the school labels and showed that we were not at 95% for 2 of our schools. We went ahead and looked at the data line by line by line, figured out what the problem was, but based on the business rules, you can't appeal data. You can only appeal a school event. That seems counterintuitive to an A to F accountability label. Isn't it about accountability? Should we not make sure that whatever labels we receive at schools, we won't even get into debate about labels, whatever labels we receive at schools are based on accurate data to the nth degree. The previous speaker talked about socioeconomic status. That impact also affects rural schools. I'm not sure if there's a change and you guys are accepting appeals based on data. I appreciate that, but if not, I would ask you, please take a look at the appeal process and allow for appeals, not just on school events, but on data, because data is not always correct. And in this case, we found some significant errors that will impact our schools. Thank you very much.
President Narducci, that concludes the requests to speak forms.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate the comments very much and appreciate your time being here. Yeah. We'll move on to item 5 in our general session, which is an amended presentation, discussion, and possible action to set cut scores and establish a timeline for the A through F school accountability letter grades for K through 8 and 9 through 12 traditional schools for the 2017-18 school year. Director Williams, any presentation?
Yes, we are. Our President Narducci, members of the board, our projector's a little wonky right now, so we have to use it sparingly. So Kellen is loading this up.
Wonkiness is a problem.
Right. Wonkiness. Okay. So in your board packets, the executive summary sheet outlines the recommendation of option 1 for cut scores. Also in the executive summary sheet, it shows the 2 options and the cut score numbers, right? Option 1 is being recommended to the board, but prior to going into the modeling for option 1, I just wanted to call to the board's attention the changes that did occur at the May 21st, 2018 board meeting in regard to the 2017-2018 A through F accountability system for traditional schools. So we have 3rd grade ELA pass rate. Remember, we put in a minimum threshold for those schools. We also put in a minimum threshold of 4% for chronic absenteeism. The full academic year, or FAE, or also known as the N count, was lowered from 20 to 10. Growth weights within the growth indicator, if you recall the old business rules, that middle column, average or expected growth, was all moved to 1 full point. And per federal ESSA requirements, we needed to remove science from the proficiency calculation, and then the board voted to award science bonus points. So again, there are 2 options. Option 1 is utilizing the 17-18 data, but using the 16 cut scores. This results in no change of the cut scores. Option 2 would use the 17-18 data, use the standard deviation, and set cut scores accordingly. So here are the reasons why for option 1. schools have been reviewing their data when they received their static file in the late spring, early summer, and they've been utilizing the 16-17 cut score while checking their data. You heard some public comment today in regard to the moving target. So if the board was to stay with option 1, which is the old cut scores or the no change cut scores, then you would not have a moving target. And then third is that in order to, sorry, I lost my train of thought. In order to compare year over year, it would be beneficial to hold steady for this year and potentially next year if the K-8 model does not change. Knowing that for the 9-12 and school year 18-19, there would need to be some adjustments to menu of assessments. And at the K-8 level, menu of assessments goes into implementation in the 19-20 school year. So both of those would be major changes to the system. So these slides are a little bit different than the last time I presented on modeling. What I did was I just put all option 1 together, and then option 2 is later on in the presentation. So I put K-8 and 9-12 in the same pages, so it's easier to see. So these would be the cut scores for option 1 at the K-8, which is in green, and the 9-12, which is in blue. Here's a modeling of option 1, and this would be all K-8 schools and all 9-12. So K-8 is in the green, 9-12 is in the blue. Again, this is using 17-18 data, but applying the 16-17 cut scores, resulting in a no change of cut score. This slide here is showing the distribution of letter grades by type of school. So we have district and charter. Notice again, K-8 is in green with your charter in dark green, your district in light green, and 9-12 is in blue and orange. Charter is in blue, district is in orange. I do want to point out one of the things, like an aha moment I had when I was looking at the data, was that there are a lot more district schools than there are charter schools. So in here you're looking at percentages. So if you just look at data, like the actual number of schools, and then you compare it to the total number of schools, it changes the graphs ever so slightly. But this is by percentages. I just wanted to point that out. And this is the modeling of option 1 by free and reduced lunch, also known as FRL. So the first graph, we have K-8. And again, these are schools that report their FRL data. There are schools that do not report their FRL data. And you look at 9-12. And again, that is by FRL percentage. Now, the high school, I have learned in the past couple weeks, high school is very difficult to have the high school students return their piece of paper that reports on FRL. So you may have a school in your mind that you're like, oh, they would be a 75%, that would be a high FRL school, but in actuality, maybe only 25% of their students return the paperwork. So that's very common at the high school level. And this is a new modeling option, or a new modeling way before the board. So what Wendy and her team did at the department, it was a modeled by distribution. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Distribution of letter grades by school size. Sorry, I told you it was very wonky. So the top is K-8. And the bottom is 9-12. And all of these presentations, for those who are watching live streamed, they are linked, I believe, on our YouTube page, because we knew that we may have issues with the projector. And you can click on the view materials here, and this presentation is in the meeting materials. Okay, before I go into the recommendation, I do want to point out to the board members and to the general public, And just to recall to the forefront of the board members' minds, at the December 2017 board meeting, the board did vote to set cut scores, not including bonus points. So this modeling that you see up here does not include bonus points. So the modeling may move a little bit once bonus points are added. It's very important that the board set the cut scores without including the bonus points. That was a point that was made very clear last fall from the field. Okay. So again, the recommendation is to approve option 1 of the cut scores for the 2017-2018 accountability system, adopt the timeline as presented, and that is in the executive summary sheet. So what would occur is that the board sets the cut scores here at today's meeting, and then they would direct the department to release letter grades to the public and to schools simultaneously by October 5th. October 5th or earlier if the department releases before October 5th through October 25th is the appeal window for open. The appeal window is open for schools to appeal their letter grade based upon mitigating factors. October 25th is that the appeals window would close, and then through November, our A3F Appeals Committee would meet and issue recommendations to the board, with the December 4th board meeting having the appeals coming before the board for consideration.
Thank you, Director Williams. Are there any questions for Director Williams? Having no questions, do I have a motion that the board approve option?
President Narducci?
We'll go for a motion and then we'll go for discussion.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion that the board approve option 1 of the cut scores for the 2017-18 accountability system, adopt the timeline as presented, and direct the Department of Education to release letter grades to the schools and public by October 5th, 2018? With that motion, do I have a discussion?
I'll second.
We have a second. Thank you.
President Narducci, I have some comments I'd like to make and share.
Please do.
Superintendent, members of the board. I'm looking at the rationale for supporting option 1, and it's my opinion that the rationale here is not on target with our original philosophy for what the grading system is trying to accomplish. Right or wrong, a year ago, this committee, this board decided that we would utilize the standard deviation model as the determining factor for how grades would be assigned. And that was based mostly on the notion that if we try to use a straight 90% as an A, 80% as a B, 70% as a C, that that would be highly unpopular with the schools. So my first point is that I want to recognize that that option B is in fact utilizing the consistent rationale we used a year ago. But that may be right or wrong. My bigger issue is that we as a board, and with a job of enforcing accountability, should consider what we're trying to accomplish as a state in terms of our grading system. What are our goals? And the nonprofit community in the education world, as well as our own governor, have adopted some goals along with our ESSA plan with the federal government. The Achieve 60 AZ initiative, as well as the Arizona Progress Meter, state that by the year 2030, which is only 12 years from now, that we are intending to increase third grade reading from 44% to 72%. So today, not even half of the Arizona students are proficient in reading skills at their grade level. And that in 8th grade math, we are hoping or planning to increase our math